Hi there. On this channel, I am beginning to repeat myself, and I've dealt with the five fetters to attaining gnosis before, and here I go again, going over the basics. Um these are the five categories, if you like, of psychological, emotional, cognitive problems that either stop us from attaining gnosis, or, as somebody reminded me the other day, they stop us from realizing that we already have gnosis, that we've already attained gnosis, we just haven't realized it yet. Which I think I've always thought that was a brilliant concept, and worth contemplating that for sure. Um, anyway, there's certainly the five fetters that keep us to the world in the world and keep us to the grindstone. And they're also the kind of the five banana skins, which the Demiurge only has to throw down as we're jogging along, doing our meditation merrily in order to trip us up. And because we're not perfect, because we're of this world, these banana skins are obviously going to do a good job. Um, and I could write a book about each of these um, five fetters, and in fact, I ought to really, because because they open up a bit like a Russian doll, a very very lot of a great deal of information, and I suppose uh, I mean the main thing is fear. That's what I put down at the bottom here. This is the sort of nadir, or not the crown, but the rear end, the butt end of these five fetters. And this is the tail of the dragon, not the head of the dragon. Although in one sense it is the head of the dragon actually, and fear is. And you only have to look around you to know that fear is what keeps us captive. And people think this is a modern thing, that governments have kept us in keep us in fear now, but they've always done it. They've always done it. If you want to not be afraid, and fear not is one of the affirmations of the Kabbalah, you must switch off all social media, all contact from the news, from official media, official news sources, and you must switch off also conspiracy theory media, and the whole industry surrounding conspiracy theories. You really, really need to purify yourself of all these sources of fear, because even if you consciously are not afraid, your subconscious becomes afraid as a result of being inundated with what Steve Hillage called zipes, unzipping the zipe, he called it. Zipes are packets of statements that produce fear and insecurity in people, and there's loads of them everywhere. So, but believe me, you've got enough fear inside yourself to cope with, without coping with all the fear that's coming to you, generated officially and unofficially. So you've got fear of death, obviously, fear of dying, fear of disease, fear of deprivation. So you've got fear of those D's, and fear of dukkha, 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 because you're afraid of going into dukkha, whereas in fact you should be going into suffering, and looking at suffering from a whole different point of view. That suffering is a source of grace, actually. So there's nothing to fear there. But it takes years of meditation to come to that realization on all levels. And so fear is the one thing that stops me anyway from getting anywhere. Fantasy, I could write a book about this. There are so many ways that fantasists and fantasy brokers make us forget our true spiritual awakening. Fantasy, the whole thing, the whole commercial edifice is based on fantasy. Aspirational lifestyles, of course, that's basis of advertising. There's so many sources of fantasy. Well, I could write a book, well, you could write a book if you like, about all the ways that we try to escape this world through fantasy, only to find ourselves becoming more enmeshed in this world as a result of our fantasizing, which is why I don't trust the astral and the etheric levels one little tiny bit, because to me, they are part of this fantasy matrix, which makes us unable to cope with the world on one level, and yet we think we can cope with the world if we fantasize on another level, on the other hand. So, goodness, fantasy. Anyway, well, I'm gone about that. Fury, well, this is something that I have. I lose my temper all the time. Well, not all the time, but pretty much pretty much all the time. And fury really, really screws you up. You become furious at yourself, furious at other people, furious at the world, furious at the governments, furious at I don't know, people that you want to blame for things. It's the blame game. Fury arises out of the blame game. And again, you could write a book about this, and obviously history is a testament to where fury can land us on a social scale, on an individual scale. Forgetfulness is an interesting one. Forgetfulness is not the same as fantasy. By forgetfulness, I actually mean forgetting that you are part of this world, that you are connected to other people, and that and there are consequences to your actions, and forget you forget to be kind to people. You forget the little things in life that make a big difference to other people's lives. So selfishness, I sort of as a subcategory of forgetfulness, and we forget that we are connected to this world, and then the world then tosses us a few banana skins associated with this category, in order to become very egocentric, megalomaniacal, even. We start cults and religions and God knows what. And we become sort of little isolated islands of insanity, and we achieve nothing except more insanity. Again, you could write a book about this too, really, and well, there's so much you could say about forgetfulness. And then frustration. Obviously, I suffer from frustration, and frustration is not only frustration with current things; it's also frustration with the things that should have been but weren't in your life. So you become frustrated with the past, I think, and you become haunted by the fact that you didn't achieve everything you wanted to achieve in life, and you're kind of so the frustration binds you to the past, as it binds you to a feeling of depression about the present, and indeed about the future. So, and of course, from frustration, fury arises, and self harm, and self hatred and self loathing, and then you escape from it into fantasy again, and then you go into forgetfulness, which arises from fantasy, but is a different category from fantasy. You forget that other people exist around you, and of course, it's all topped with a generous helping of fear, which of course is the basis of these worlds of the Demiurge, because from scarcity, as I said before, arises fear, and avarice, and jealousy, and every other negativity that you can imagine actually arises from fears. You could write a book about that too. But it's not going to go on about it, because going on about these five Fs or five fetters actually makes them stronger, really, because you kind of focus on them. What can you do about it? You can follow the Gnostic rule. You can live the Gnostic life. You can live the contemplative life. There's plenty you can do about these five Fs within yourself, even if you can't do anything about them within the world. And you can only change yourself anyway, ultimately. So this is really, really a key wake up call, I suppose. When you come insightful, you realise that you're full of these five Fs, and you don't give an F about them, whereas you should. But the only thing you can do, I suppose, really, is go into the voice of the silence, go listen to the voice of the silence, go into the deep silence, contemplate, the words of the scriptures, and what other people have said about the problem, the existential problem of these five fetters. Of course, read the Heart Sutra. That goes without saying. The Buddhist doctrine is all about this. And although they put it in context of reincarnation, but you don't even have to believe in reincarnation necessarily in order to believe that the five fetters do exactly what they say on the tin. They fetter you. They chain you to your own inadequate self on one hand, and they chain you to the world, inadequate and dualistic as it is, on the other. So you need to break out of those chains, but the only way to break out of the chains is to look at yourself, gain insight into yourself and how they relate to these five Fs, and seek peace and quietude within the matrix of these five Fs. And even that's no absolute guarantee that things will work out, because we are imperfect. So these five Fs are going to come back and back and back and back and back. There are five kinds of virus, I suppose you could say, that are going to come back. They're endemic to human beings, to all sentient beings, I suppose. All sentient beings have fury. All sentient beings have frustration. All sentient beings forget that they're part of a whole. All sentient beings are fearful. And all sentient beings go into some kind of level of fantasy whereby they are kept from understanding the real situation that they find themselves in. Of course, obviously, higher sentient beings are more prone to this than other sentient beings, but I think animals do fantasize. I mean, animals certainly dream. If I've watched a dog or a cat dreaming, I'm sure that wild animals and domesticated animals dream, and they go into the astral levels and try to seek some kind of solace there. But you have to wake up from that, obviously. And anyway, it's a false solace that you are finding there. So I hope I've kind of laid out the nub of the problem here. And all that you can do, as I said before, is follow the rule of Gnosticism, and try to seek a practical Gnostic path for remembering what you have forgotten, which is that you are, of course, soul.